Death is the unyielding truth that binds us all, an inevitable, profound, and deeply intimate encounter with the finite nature of life. It arrives without warning, shattering the world we thought we knew. In its wake, grief emerges, often dismissed as something to fix or get over. But what if grief, in its suffocating pain, is not a burden to carry or something from which we need to move on? What if grief is instead a sacred invitation, an opening to feel more deeply, to connect in unimaginable ways, and to transform all that we knew to be true? I'm Laura Walton, and I'm so grateful you're here. Together, let's step into the uncharted terrain of death and grief, not as something to fear or avoid, but as a force that shapes us, breaks us, and ultimately remakes us. Let's meet it not with resistance, but with curiosity and courage. And let's do this on purpose. Welcome back to Grief on Purpose, the podcast. Today, I am here with guest Billy Brandis, who I've known since I was probably 20. You were 17 or 18, but I've known you for quite a long time, but we haven't seen each other in quite a long time either. So thank you for being here, Billy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I was 17, I believe, the first time I met up with Scotty over at your guys' place long time ago.
Yeah. So what's your perspective on how that happened? How did we come into each other's worlds?
So I used to work at Cowtown skateboard shop in downtown Phoenix, and I believe that's where I met Scott the first time because he would come in and just like in between his stays in LA and then staying with you guys. And me and him would go skate, and then one day he was just like, "Yeah, you guys should come out and hang out tonight." And I remember I brought a girl over to your guys' place because on a date, and then she didn't want to be there anymore. So I drove her all the way back to the west side of Phoenix and then came back because I got caught up in the whole like semi-pro skateboarder, piss drunks, kind of all that stuff.
Yeah, it's very alluring.
It was at the time, yeah. It was, yeah.
Not surprising to me that she didn't want to be there, though. I didn't want to be there, and I lived there. Just kidding. It was fun. Yeah, so you came over there that first day with Scott, and then you just kind of like fell into that crew then. I think it just became friends with that whole crew, from my perspective at least, pretty quickly.
I did. I somehow just embedded myself in your guys' house, despite anyone else, having a say in anything. I don't think that was taken too kindly by some of the other people that live there. But yeah, and then I ended up meeting Joe, dancer, and then me and him got a place after that. And then all kinds of stuff happened and after that point.
Oh yeah, all kinds of stuff happened a lot during that period. I forgot that you and Joe had lived together, actually.
Yeah, and also too, to tie that in there, like I moved into to the coop with you guys. That was like, I don't even think that was a full year after my dad had passed away. I think that was only like, or it might have been like right around that year mark, actually.
Yeah. And so that actually had sent you a message, Billy, inviting you to do this, to be on this podcast. And that was for better or worse, one of the first things I knew about you was that your dad had died. And I don't remember even who said that or why that was even something that was being talked about, but that was like one piece of information that I had about you, which I didn't have a lot of other pieces of information about you. So that was kind of just one of the ways that I thought of you first initially. And I think this timing works out. How old were you when your dad died?
I believe 16, like 2 months before turning 17. So I think I was at the tail end of my 16th year.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, this timing would pan out. So my dad was still alive at the time I met you, but my dad died when I was 21. So you would have been like 18 or something, 19. So I didn't, and as you can maybe relate, like when you're that young, like there's not a lot of other people who have had anybody die. And in a weird way, like when my dad died, even though we weren't really necessarily close, I was like, well, I know somebody else whose dad has died, so that was like brought this like weird source of comfort in a kind of interesting way to me when that happened.
Oh, at that age, it can be a totally unspoken kind of connection because, like as you said, not many people have gone through something like that, or if they have, it's someone very distant or maybe perhaps even older. So there's not too close of a connection there, and it can also be very I hate to say the word lonely, but it's a uncharted territory place at that age.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. So what was, I mean, 16, that's so young. So what was that like for you?
Oh, well, I remember I mean, that day waking up to go to school and going through that routine. And I probably got like, a quarter of the way through it before my mom came in my room and she was crying and told me I didn't have to go to school that day and gave me a hug. And obviously, big news, something was wrong. And then she told me my dad passed away. And I remember just kind of like, it was almost like a shutdown, like collapsing. I just went and very just almost limp in a way. And I went and just laid back down in bed and then proceeded to spend the rest of that day in bed until later on in that afternoon when I went skateboarding, which, because back in those days, that's really all I had to, as far as like an outlet or a thing that I did for, I mean, you kind of knew it was like being around that culture a little bit. We did it no matter what.
Hmm.
And that was my initial processing of that, was just to go into complete shutdown mode and then just go skateboarding for the rest of the afternoon just to take my mind off of it.
Hmm.
In
Yeah.
some way, not that my mind was taken off of it, but it was just very much like a void feeling. I didn't know what to do.
Hmm. And I imagine in the immediate aftermath, like days, weeks afterwards, you still didn't know what to do.
Oh yeah, there was very much this like, like vacuum feeling. And then I remember going over to my dad's house after talking to to his brother. And when I went, because my dad had a woman that he was seeing as well. And when I went over there to go have a look around the house or whatever, there was like post-it notes all over literally everything in the house had a post-it note on it that was marked for her sister. And I thought that was very odd. And then so when I called my uncle and told him about that, he was like, "Well, I'm coming out to take care of this, so don't worry about it." But like, aside from my dad passing away, there was the weird that family issues that came with it too. My parents had been divorced. My dad had cheated on my mom with this strange woman who was now thinking that she was going to take control of everything that was left behind. People started suing my dad because he was an attorney. And so much of this just started happening all at once, and it was a lot to take in. And then on top of that, the whole funeral situation and having to see that the casket get lowered into the ground, and then I had to take a shovel full of dirt because of the religious tradition and like dump it down on top of there. I lost it at that point. That's when
Hmm.
the real finality of it all hit me, was when I took that shovel and dumped dirt down into the ground. I remember I threw the shovel like out of, visceral reaction to it. I threw it and ran over to my uncle and started crying into his stomach.
Mm. Oh, that's so heartbreaking to just picture a 16-year-old. We feel so old when we're 16, but looking back, they're such babies. Oh.
Well, and also too, I don't want to forget this part too, but my dad had MS really bad too.
Hmm.
I think he developed that when I was probably in middle school. And it just slowly got worse. He went from, like, me and him were playing catch in our backyard with a baseball, and he fell down and he was having control issues with his legs. And it went from that to him walking with a cane to having to use a motorized scooter to being completely bedridden, like just in a couple years. And it was very
Hmm.
aggressive. I mean, very, 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 very bad. And so he developed a bit of a drug issue with that. And that is essentially what killed him. He died from a cocaine and methadone overdose, which,
Oh.
when it actually happened, my mom told me it was an asthma attack. So that first year initially of him dying, I thought he died from an asthma attack. And then on my
Mm.
18th birthday, I went to go celebrate with my mom, and she told me this is actually what happened. And I saw the death certificate. And I was like, "Oh, that's weird. Like, why did you lie to me about that?" And she just, I guess she felt more comfortable telling me that it wasn't from drugs. I don't know. I never really got a whole explanation of that because my mom was a very secretive person. But so that was just that I felt like he passed away a little bit before he passed away, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And also in the same way with my mom, but we'll get to that part a little bit later. But because he was so sick and like his he was a pretty active guy, work was his life, and he was a very busy person. And then taking that all away with the disease that he got, and him retreating into this like weird recluse drug user in his bedroom. He was there, but he wasn't there. And so that was sad, having to go through that for a couple years. And then eventually when he died, obviously that was the big one, which was still sad. But it was just a kind of, a, like, the long goodbye in a very different way than it comes to like the
Hmm.
Alzheimer's thing.
Yeah, and that's so complex, just all the different layers of like losing him in different ways for quite a drawn out time.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your dad's name?
His name is Richard.
Richard? Yeah. Okay. And what was your relationship like with him?
Oh man. He was a bit of a workaholic. And so he wasn't, I mean, he was around, but not all the time. He was at the office quite a bit. But before he got sick with MS, we had pretty active. Baseball was my thing before skateboarding. So like Little League, he sponsored a couple of our Little League teams, and me and him were pretty active as far as like playing catch and practicing and that kind of thing. We would go on trips when he would have to go out of town for work or something. He had a couple like sports clients, so we would get tickets to go to, I believe we went to like an NBA All-Star thing in like the early 90s out in Chicago somewhere. And he would just do those kinds of things. Like I don't know what kind of strings he pulled on this one, but when I was a little kid, like during halftime of a Suns game, the gorilla came and grabbed me out of the crowd and took me down to half court on the basketball floor and
Mhm.
was like trying to get me to dance with him and shit, which is like cool. But when I was a little kid, I was very shy. And when I'm looking around at thousands of people looking down at me, I froze and started
Yeah.
crying. So instead of dancing and having a good time, it turned into a nightmare for me. But I get what he was trying to do. He was trying to show me a special time. So I know that he absolutely loved me. You know, I was his only child. I have two sisters, but they have a different dad. And that's also like I can feel him with me at times still. Like I felt like all throughout my life since then, obviously since he's passed, there's been moments that have come up where I just feel his presence there.
Yeah. How do you feel that?
His presence.
Yeah. Like, what does
Oh,
that feel like to you?
well, like one of the specific examples I was thinking about earlier, just in case we did dive into this one a little bit more. Sometimes when I'll get in like a hairy situation that I feel like could go, I mean, it's already gone south enough, but I feel like could eventually go progressively worse. It seems like almost these like little divine intervention-y kind of moments where something comes up or happens that changes the trajectory of that. And it's hard not to feel like, okay, that was my dad
Mhm.
looking out for me there. And one example I'll use, and I'm going to keep names out of this and certain details too, but I, a couple years ago, went out to Vegas with a person that me and you both know. And we were going to go to Vegas, and then we were going to go to Reno, and then we were going to go to San Francisco and LA and do this whole circle trip. And I hadn't seen them for a really long time. And I was kind of, maybe they don't do, because I don't really drink or do any partying stuff anymore. And they still did that. And we went out to Vegas. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll break my rules since we're out here. And plus, I also don't have anywhere else to go. There was no like escape from that kind of atmosphere unless I wanted to go get a whole other room. But anyway, it ended up going south pretty bad. And me and him got into an altercation, and he ended up like tossing me out of the room without anything that I had. I didn't have my wallet. I didn't have my phone. I didn't have shoes on my feet. I just had the clothes I was wearing and just socks on. Like I was at nothing. And the security wouldn't let me enter the room anymore because it wasn't registered in my name. And next thing you know, like I'm being told I can't be in the hotel anymore. And I'm on the strip in Vegas with absolutely nothing. I don't have a phone. I don't have my wallet. I have no access to anything. And I'm just like, okay, great. I'm now like, what am I homeless in Vegas? What is going on here? And and it's the strip. There's a sea of people walking around on a weekend night. It's not easy to just spot somebody out there. It turns into kind of like a Where's Waldo situation. And I just had a brief interaction with these people. So it's like, how are they going to remember my name? I mean, I know they deal with folks all the time. It's part of their job. Anyway, I got far enough out away from the hotel and everything to where I was just now engulfed by a sea of people. And I just heard my name being yelled. And as I turned around and looked, there was this one specific security person there. And he's like, hey, I'm glad you didn't get too far. We just now got permission to go into the room and get all the things that you need to get. What are we looking for? And then I was able to tell them where all the stuff that I was in the room that I needed to get so I could get out of there. And they got like maybe 80% of it. Like I had my guitar that they got, but they didn't get like the case it was in and stuff like that. And so I was able to leave there and go to the airport and catch a flight back to Phoenix. But that was one of those moments where I was like, there's no way. There's no way. I was in the middle of a sea of people after this weird altercation in Vegas there was no way that these people would have found me. And
Yeah.
somehow it did. And I know that's like not the most happy, fun story, as far as like the things that we were doing. But it was just one of those moments where to me it was so clear that I was like, my dad is still, he's been looking out for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love those stories. I've had a lot of things like that too. And it's really hard to put into words, and it's really hard to explain to somebody who's maybe never experienced something like that. But there's this, in my experience at least, there's this crazy thing that happens. And then there's also this, for me, I feel like this weird connection, like that person's there somehow. As crazy as it may sound and as hard as it is to describe, it's like a felt sense. Do you have something similar? Like you feel it?
At certain times, yeah, it can almost
Yeah.
feel like it can calm you down, or at least it can for me. It can be very like reassuring and just almost trusting that whatever you're going through at that time is it's going to work out.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's kind of like that hand that comes out and kind of guides you through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, too, I've noticed in those kinds of moments sometimes that, like, more so with my dad, I don't know if enough time has passed with my mom for this to manifest itself in any way, but I've noticed that my dad he'll show himself sometimes in the form of a small butterfly.
Hmm.
In some of those kinds of moments when I'll be thinking about him, or when things are starting to get kind of, I mean, that one was at nighttime in Vegas, so it wasn't butterflies around too much for that one, but I have had that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's cool. So your dad died when you were so young, and you were told something that was untrue about his death. Yeah. How do you think that impacted you?
That was quite the shock. So I mean, drugs wasn't a surprise that he was using them. When I was a little kid, me and so my dad, I think I mentioned before, he was an attorney. So one of his law partners, his kid, we were friends. We got along. So it's like we really were friends. But at the beginning, it was like we were friends by proxy. Like we were around each other a lot. And our like my dad and his dad would play golf all the time, aside from working together and everything else. And one day we found their stash of marijuana in the trunk of the car. And I remember calling my dad out on it and be like, I didn't know what it was at the time, because when my dad would go play golf, he would smoke, but he never smoked at home. And my mom was a cigarette smoker. And I'm like, Dad, cigarettes smell different. And I remember asking him, I was like, Dad, how come your cigarettes smell different than mom's? And his excuse was like, oh, it's because I smoke Camels. And I was like, okay, I had no idea at the time until we found the shoebox full of weed in the trunk. I was like, oh, this is what that smell is on the golf course. We still didn't know what it was at the time, but obviously years later, you put it all together. But once my dad got sick with MS, he had this like bedside table thing, like a little rolly drawer that had a bunch of different drawers in it. And one day I went in it to go grab something. I think he was either sleeping, or might have been like one of the rare times that he wasn't at the house, like maybe he had a medical appointment or something. But I opened up the drawer and there was a mirror on it with a bunch of white powder. Again, too young to know what it was at the time. Obviously, looking back on it, it's like, okay, that was a bunch of cocaine that he had there. So it was like, it made sense once it was told to me that what had happened, what he had passed away from. But the fact that my mom lied to me about it was for an entire year too, it felt very like having to, like, 1 year is not that long, but almost having to relive it again in a different way, because now different circumstances, even though it wasn't like shocking, it was just like, oh, okay, I thought this was in a way not done with, but kind of like that. There was no more to discover there. And then having that come up, it was just very confusing. And like also a whole other question said about my mom, like, why would she lie to me about that?
Hmm.
And if she's going to lie to me about that, what other kind of lies are we talking about here? It was only years later when I come to find out that my mom was very secretive about a lot of things in her life.
Yeah. Yeah. Did that impact the relationship with your mom afterwards at all?
Yeah, we were already on a rocky point in that, because I developed an eating disorder like right around the time that my dad was getting really sick and he had passed away. I feel bad for my mom having to deal with all that she was at that time, because not only was she having to deal with that, but I was being a little asshole and then having an eating disorder. And like I very much became that kind of cliche kid whose dad died and then just turned into, I don't want to say rebel, but like I did everything that I wasn't supposed to do, that I wasn't doing before. And
Yeah.
not to piss anybody. It was like subconsciously happening too. I didn't like set out to do that. It just happened.
Yeah. I was kind of curious about that because we were both a part of this scene that was a big party scene. There was lots of drinking, drug use, like there was a lot going on there. So I was curious about for you if, as you've reflected back on it, do you feel like your dad's death had any impact on how you ended up in that scene?
Oh yeah. I don't feel, I mean, there was just nobody there to have any other kind, there was no other side of that coin there. There was no other influence around. And because even all the older people I looked up to were all skateboarders. Even the ones that weren't like drinking or partying, they weren't actively trying to be super positive in any other way against it. They were just kind of, focused on doing their own thing. My dad was very into academics in school, and so when he got sick, he kind of, not that he gave up interest in that on my part, but he just didn't have the capacity and to deal with that anymore. And so when that, as a kid, I mean, that's, you kind of only live to, I mean, as long as your parents are decent, you kind of only live to do things to please them or whatever, or make them proud. And my mom was in this, my mom's always been, I don't know, maybe because like my sisters are older and they were her first children, she kind of has always leaned into what they're doing more than she was doing with me. But when my dad was gone, there was really nobody that, I mean, my mom cared, but she wasn't like the same kind of level of interest, I feel like. So when that when that went away, the only other people I had around me that were older were a bunch of drinking, skateboarding people, and that's what I went to.
Mhm. Yeah, that was a place to, for me at least, it was a place where you felt like you fit in, you belonged in that. And there were lots of ways to distract from
Yeah,
anything that might have been
and there
going
was
on.
just and there was just so many people. Like I try to explain to some folks that weren't to some of my improv friends about how big that scene was out in Arizona in the, was it like late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, about
Mhm.
how big the skateboard scene was and the subculture we had. And oh yeah, talk about someone who's going through a bunch of shit. You fit right in there when it comes to
Yeah,
like anything that can, substance wise.
yeah. That's funny. Some of the girls who were in that crew who I'm still friends with we have joked about, we've told stories of some of the things that happened to other people who were in it. And they're like, what the fuck? What were you doing? Some of those stories you just like, they're so normal to us, but out
Oh
of
yeah.
context, you're like, that is not normal.
Oh yeah. I remember, yeah, some of the old Reno stories too. I remember sharing with one of my improv friends. When I got done talking about it, just the look on their face was just like mouth agape, eyes wide open, just like, wow.
Oh my gosh. I want to document these stories before I forget them all. I'm already halfway there. But anyway, so would you have said you were closer to your dad at the time of his death than your mom?
Gosh, it's so hard because as I mentioned before, my dad was such a workaholic, and then like we were really close when I was into baseball and sports and all that kind of thing. But then my dad got sick, and then also around that same kind of time is when I discovered what a skateboard was. And I don't, I mean, I love skateboarding. I love the culture of it. I feel like it's created me as who I am to my core more than anything else. But I feel like in my parents' world, when I discovered that, that was like, fuck. Oh no, not like he was doing so well in all these other things. And now there's this because I
Mm.
stopped playing baseball and stopped caring about it. Like I was so interested in skateboarding to where like me and my mom's relationship was kind of, I mean, that's kind of like what started maybe weird, some like the rockiness or whatever. My dad, I feel like my dad just wanted to do like maybe whatever I was into, but he wasn't super, I don't know, he didn't know what to do with the skateboarding thing really.
Yeah. It's such an awkward age too.
Yeah,
We
he was.
already naturally get away from our parents.
Oh yeah. And then, well, that was and another thing too, is like, I thought we were really close and we were really close, but for whatever reason, there was this like kid that lived across the street from me who didn't necessarily care for my dad. And it was always like, there was this kid now is like putting weird thoughts into my head about who my dad is. And sometimes you can believe things because you want to be accepted by people as a friend. So then outside influences start shaping your opinions about things. And I felt like a little bit of that was happening as I started hitting like those early teen years when you start looking at your families. I guess it's natural though when you have that like, ew, family, gross, kind of want to get away from them kind of feeling.
So was your dad the first death that you had experienced?
I believe,
Significant death.
yeah, he was.
Hmm.
I was, yeah, my grandmother on my dad's side had passed away before, like shortly before I was born.
Hmm.
So I never really got to experience her. But yeah, my dad was the first one.
Okay. And I know your mom has died recently, which we will talk about her in a second. But in between your dad and your mom, did you have any other deaths that you experienced that you thought were that were very significant to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, two, one, I think we can both kind of, uh, you know, speak on for with Bo. And then another one was this guy Austin, who a long time ago was another young skateboard friend that not necessarily. I mean, we were all kind of part of the same one big scene, but he wasn't necessarily part of like my everyday kind of thing. Although he did come over to one of our houses that we had almost every weekend. But yeah, when Austin killed himself, that was a pretty rough one that kind of shook everybody up. I don't know. I feel like sometimes at those young ages, and especially the kind of people that we were around and what we did, I remember going to his funeral and not saying it was a party, but it was just more like people were just drinking everywhere.
Yeah.
And I know I wasn't drinking there. I was drinking before and I drank afterwards, but I know that why we were doing it, but it didn't feel, I don't know. It felt very different than what my feeling with death was that I'd experienced previously years before with my dad. And then years later when Bo passed, that was, yeah, that one was pretty rough.
Yeah. Austin, I remember Austin. He died, I don't remember the timeline though. He died before Bo did.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. I want to say it was, oh geez, I don't even know year wise, but we were at some like lake, like it was me, him, and this guy Chip and a couple other people. I remember I didn't hang out with them like a whole lot, but randomly I went to a lake, like one of the lakes out here with them, and we had a pretty good time. And then I feel like I'm like within the next like 6 months to a year or something after that, the next I had heard about him was that he had hung himself,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I think he videotaped it too or something.
Yeah, I remember hearing that story. Yeah, he was around a little bit, from my perspective at least. So I knew who he was and had hung out with him a few times, but I don't think I had his phone number. I wasn't that close to him. But yeah, so both of those, I know the year Bo died in 2007, which I was 26, so still very young in our early 20s. So how did being then early to mid 20s at this point, how did those deaths, and they're your peers, right? And your friends, is a different relationship than your parents. How did those deaths impact you?
When Bo died, that one was like I had just seen him. I was just out in Reno, I think a couple days before, because that was during that period of time where I would go up there. Shit, it felt like almost every other month I'd fly home, pay my rent in Phoenix, and then just go right back out to Reno.
I
And never
remember that.
felt so bad because like I never paid anyone rent out there when I probably should have, because that's
Mhm.
where I was spending all my time. But yeah, that one was like we were just hanging out and doing stuff, like a couple days before that, and then getting that phone call. I think it was Jake that called me, and it was super early in the morning, I believe, getting a phone call. And I looked at my phone, and back in those days, you're like, oh, someone calls you that early, it's like, oh, they're still up from the night before, and
Yeah.
I don't want to answer it because they're going to be all trashed. And so I just didn't answer the first time, and he called me back a second. I either answered on the second or third time, and he just, he was had tears in his in his voice, and he told me what happened, and it was as close as you can be to that first time that I had where like everything just went numb and you could feel like your spirit leave your body for a sec, and just that I like I don't know, I guess it's like that first initial just shock response that you have where you don't want to believe it. And I think shortly after that, like later on in that day, like me and Max and Mechanic and a couple other people, I think got together. If it wasn't later on that day, it was the next day, and started, talking about making plans to going up there. But that one was very like it felt like I don't know, like a big, like he was such a cultural figure in our crew, and it felt that way. It felt like a heavy, heavy, heavy loss.
It was a big loss. Yeah, that he had so many, sounds silly, but so many arms is the image that like just like reach out to all these different people in different states. He had so many connections. So it was such a widespread impact.
It was like, yeah, I don't know, like that's a good way to put it, how you're saying so many arms out there, because there was like I remember when he had the like the celebration of life up in, well, I don't know, I don't remember what casino it was, and if it was like in the Calneva or which one it was, but there was people from all over the globe that came out to celebrate his life, and it
Mhm.
was that was also one of those times too, where at least I could, it felt like his kind of room.
Yeah. Are you there? I think we just froze for a second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear. I had a low bandwidth thing or something come up on
Okay,
screen.
no problem. We'll take care of that. Okay. So yeah, Bo's death was very, very far reaching, very impactful.
And that was also one of those people too that like I guess it's doing the whole like butterfly effect thing and looking back. I'm like, if I never would have, if me and Scott would have never met and then he invited me to come out to the coop, I probably would have never met Bo because I would have never met you and would have never met a lot of those people. So it's interesting the decisions and choices that we make, who you're going to come into contact with, and essentially like make a pretty big impact on your life and who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still certain little tidbits of things that of his that I think about pretty actively. Like one was one of the last times I saw him, he came over to Sinclair. I don't know like what time it was, but I remember him joking around kind of me with like sort of being like, damn, I was hoping to catch you early enough before you started drinking. And it was kind of like this, it hurt in a way though, by him saying that, because it was like a self-realization thing about me of like what I was doing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I know he didn't mean it that way. He genuinely wanted to spend time with somebody before, like the actual person that they had missed being around.
Yeah.
And he was just such a genuine person too. And that was, I feel like I mean, not only is that hard enough to come across in life, just in general with people, but
Mm-hmm.
especially around some of the folks that I feel like were in that specific scene back in the day.
It was unique in that way. What about Austin's death? How did that impact you?
Austin's was, well, from what I was told about it, was that he had done what he did because of it was over a girl that he was seeing or something. And yeah, I don't know. It was, I don't know if I was old enough or not old enough, but like my dad had passed away. So it was still such like a fresh open wound or something. And I was still going through my like early on kind of like I don't know, rebellious kind of phase or whatever. I wasn't processing any of that kind of information to where when Austin went, I think I may have just still been a little too numb for it.
Yeah, that can definitely happen. I think that happened to me when my dad and Bo died 5 years apart. And when my dad died, I just pretended it didn't happen to some degree. But then when Bo died, I couldn't do that anymore for both of them. And it just compounded on top of each other.
It's weird too, because I guess sometimes like thinking back on it now, I don't know. And having this conversation, I almost making me feel like, did I not care enough or something at the time?
Yeah, I doubt it was that you didn't care. I would assume it was more that we had learned to check out from a lot of things. And this is a big thing.
Another real quick too, I don't know how I didn't think of this one earlier, but Dave Smith was another like kind of local like legend in the skateboard community.
Mm-hmm.
And he passed away probably coming close to like a year now or so, or at least 8-ish months or something like that. But he was one of the first people that ever took me outside of my, like he was one of the first people that picked me up to take me out skateboarding and like driving wise before I had a license or anything like that, or any of my other friends did. And when I found out that he had passed away, that one, even though we hadn't seen each other in so long, like it hit really hard. I guess it's kind of, and like, I guess that's kind of like to couple up with what I was talking about, the Austin thing is you never know which, and it sounds so weird and shitty in a way, but you never know which ones or who people, where it's going to come from when that buildup of those feelings are going to hit you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unpredictable. And sometimes it comes when like in a situation when you wouldn't really expect it. So you've had a lot of deaths happen, and we haven't even got to mom yet.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I should have made a list or something, but yeah, now that we're talking about it, I'm starting to think about a few other ones that have popped up, unexpected ones. I remember do you remember the Miller brothers, right? Dave and Jay?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, when I found out when Jay
Mhm.
passed away, I think he was up in, I want to say he was up in Portland, maybe. But yeah, when I found out about his, so I was getting ready to go do an improv show, and I was scrolling through social media and found out about it. And that was like an hour before I was going to go on stage. And oh man, I was crying. And a couple other of my friends at the theater asked me if I wanted to join with them, which was a team that I normally didn't play with at the time, but it was just kind of like, hey, come join us and get your mind off it. And that was really nice. That night was having that kind of like support when I didn't one wasn't going out for that, wasn't expecting for any of that to happen. So it was like the unexpected discovery, but then also the unexpected like group hug from an entire community, I
Yeah,
mean, of people that were there that night.
yeah, yeah. That's really meaningful. Mm. So it's been a few months now since your mom died, right? Or when did she die?
Yeah, so she passed away right before she would have been 75 in April, and she
So she,
passed away at the end of March.
okay, yeah, so it's been a few months. So what was that like for you?
So she had developed, I believe it's TPD. I don't know the exact, it's just my sister was talking about it over and over again the last time she was out here. But it was a form of like dementia, Alzheimer, it's in that kind of field. So a few years ago, they came out here and rented an Airbnb. I guess I should go back a little bit. So my mom lived out in Glendale for a little while, for a long time. And one day she calls me and tells me that my sisters are coming into town and she's selling the house and moving back up to Minnesota. And I was like, okay, that's a little weird that you're just like, you're not telling me you're thinking about doing this. Like this, the decision's already been made and you're doing that. She's from there originally. So that's not, the fact that she wanted to go back there wasn't surprising. But I found out that she had fallen down and couldn't get up off the floor for like a day. She spent like an entire day on the ground until she was able to finally get up and get to the phone and call for help or something like that. And I was like, okay, like I live here in Phoenix. You could have called, I guess you couldn't get to the phone, but I would have come to help you. And she didn't tell me about it. And that's when around that time, she made the decision that she wanted to move back up there. But so so she had left and moved back up to Minnesota, but then when they came down a couple years ago, after she had developed this kind of brain disease, like she was already kind of, I knew that was probably the last time I was going to see my mom, and she wasn't at all anything like she was because she had devolved so rapidly into this disease that had her. And all the stories that I would hear from my sister on the phone sounded really bad because she was turning very aggressive and having fits and outbursts and those kinds of things. So in this weird way, I had like mentally prepared myself that, well, that was probably the last time I'm going to see my mom. Now it's just like a matter of time until I get that phone call. And she had passed away once before. She had a heart attack and they were able to bring her back to life, I guess. So my sister called me one night and told me that it happened and she was crying and freaking out. So that was like the little, I don't want to say like, dry run or teaser or anything, but like a few months later, I just gotten home from the theater and my sister called me again and it was like at 10:30 at night. And I knew if you get a phone call at this point, at this time of night, like it's not going to be good. And I answered it. She was crying. And I mean, everyone goes through everyone handles everything differently. And she was taking a very, very long time to just get to, and this sounds like heartless, but like just to get to tell me that she was gone. And so I just said, Nikki, is mom dead? And then she didn't answer. And I said, is mom dead? And she was crying and said yes. And said that she was just like she had just gotten the phone call from the home and she was getting ready to go down there to go look at her and all that. And yeah, she had passed away from the norovirus, surprisingly, is what got her.
Hmm. So it sounds like you were expecting it in some degree. You knew you weren't, I mean, you had a sense that you weren't going to see her again.
I thought We had another probably like year or two,
Oh, okay.
like 2 at the most. I wasn't expecting it to be, anytime like that soon.
Oh,
I
got it.
thought possibly, like, maybe even I could maybe go fly up to Minnesota and see her, like, one more time, but also, again, like I said, like, I had resigned myself to that being the last time that I saw my mom, but also at the same time, you can say and try to mentally plan for those kinds of things as much as you want, but when it
Uh,
actually happens, it's
yeah.
kinda goes out the window.
Yeah, there's no preparing for how that's going to impact you, what that's going to mean for you at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then this, like, cascade of information that came out from my sisters about my mom, kind of, well, not totally after she died. Some of this was coming out kind of along the way as they were caretaking of her. But yeah, just a lot of things that I had no idea my mom was into.
You're learning about your mom more.
Yeah. Yeah,
Sure.
they just put together this because they were just out here like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and to bring me her ashes, and because that's the other thing too. I'm like, "Well, what am I supposed to do now? Should I am I do you need me to fly up to Minnesota? Are we gonna what are we gonna do for services and all that?" And I was just told to just sit tight. They're gonna come out here in June, and they'll bring me that my mom wanted to be cremated. So it felt very disconnected when she passed away because I didn't have anyone else out here, and not being able to just go. I mean, I guess I could have said, fuck it, I'm getting on an airplane and flown out there, but I didn't. And all that, just, I don't know, it felt very just surreal and disconnected. I will say this though, that for the first, and I don't know what brought this on or how this happened, but for like the first like 48 to 72 hours after my mom passed away, I felt it gave me this, not that I was pleased that she was gone or anything, but it gave me this like peaceful feeling to where I wasn't afraid of my own death for a while. And it
Mhm.
felt for the first time I ever felt that kind of like that feeling. And I don't know if it's
Mhm.
because of like both parents being gone now or just, what it was, the stuff that we can't explain. I don't, I've now have reverted kind of back to my normal feeling about it. But for a while it was, yeah, for like at least 72 hours or so, it was this very like almost cathartic feeling about death. And like that it
Mhm.
was just, it was okay to go whenever I was going to go.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you have any beliefs about death, about what happens when we die?
Geez, I don't know. No, I've never been able to fully like 100% just believe in something like that. I
Mm.
want to, but then I think we all do. But yeah, no. How about you?
I believe that we're energy and that our energy doesn't die and that our energy is still around in some form. And part of that, actually, I would say all of that belief system is formed by my own experiences, what we were talking about earlier, just that I had in the more immediate aftermaths of the deaths that I've experienced. But the amount of things that happened and the craziness of things that happened to me just seemed too impossible to be coincidence. So I believe that energy is out there somewhere, somehow, some way, but I don't know exactly how or what that means or if that ever changes into something else.
That's probably like like my closest aligned thoughts would be probably in that kind of area that you're talking about there.
So you're 42 now, so you're still pretty young, and both parents are now dead. What does that mean to you?
It's very, I don't know. Something I wanted to mention too before I forget about it is so when my dad passed away, because I was 17, and just recently I stumbled across this, and I don't know, like maybe you are familiar with it doing the work that you kind of do, but I don't know if this is like I don't know if the trauma age is what it's actually called or if there's another clinical name for it. But people that experience very traumatic things in their youth can kind of sometimes get mentally stuck in there
Yeah.
for like the rest of their lives almost.
Hmm.
And so when my dad passed away, I was 17, and I mean, very immature sense of humor, like just I mean, still like clever though, I guess, but there was still part of me now feels like that I've never fully was able to become a fully quote unquote like, grown functioning adult suit and tie wearing, whatever the fuck you want to call it, like person. Because of that, I feel like I stayed stagnant, stuck in that mindset from like almost like life got put on pause in like a weird kind of way,
Hmm.
mentally or something. And then I never have been able to come back out of that. So being 42 now and having both my parents gone, it still feels like that now, but amplified even more. And but also now this other, like, this kind of like growing resignation feeling of like, well, I'm going to go soon. Like my days are numbered. It's not like I probably have more behind me than I do ahead of all that kind of stuff has now started to creep in, not in this crazy super negative way yet, but I'm glad that I have the community of friends that I do, and my sisters are still around, and yeah.
I know it's crazy when we start to like see that, like our own mortality in that context. I mean, my mom is still alive, but she's old and she's not, she has a lot of health issues. And to see that decline and be like, well, I'm not 20 anymore. That it just feels like a fast forward in some ways, and it's coming to terms with that is a whole other thing.
Oh yeah. And also too, so much feels, I mean, some experiences like that, the moment from when my mom coming into my bedroom and telling me my dad passed away, that one feels as crystal clear as fucking like it happened this morning. I can almost recall
Yes.
so
Yeah.
many details of those. But then there's other, and then from that moment to now, everything that's happened in between, it's felt like I don't know, that the cliche statement of like, blink of an eye, but
Mhm.
so much has happened between then and now, and like an entire life has been lived almost.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, being older now too, and then starting to have regrets about things, and just, yeah, not never having really anyone to talk to on that parental side, and all like the family question, because there's all kinds of questions I have about family stuff now, and medical history stuff like that I can't
Mhm.
never get to ask.
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me too. Yeah, just wrapping my head around that. And then there's a lot of things I'll never know, probably. And okay, how do we live with that?
And then also coming to the final kind of conclusion of that, even though maybe I had disagreements with my mom at some point, we didn't see eye to eye, like she did a she did her best that she thought that she was trying to do as far as raising three children with two different fathers, and all the different kind of, relationship struggles that I come to find out later on in life that she, wasn't talking about.
Yeah.
And when we're kids, we look at our parents as being almost like invincible or people that can't do wrong, but then getting older and realizing what kind of struggles that they were going through, it kind
They're
of,
humans too.
yeah. And whatever they instilled in us is kind of like, I don't know, in a way we carry that on, as cheesy as that sounds, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm realizing I didn't give you like a formal introduction at the beginning, meaning saying you live in Phoenix, yes. But what is it you're doing these days? Because I see bits on social media, but I'm a little unclear on what it is, but it looks really cool.
Yeah, so I'll give you like the quick long version. So 10 years ago I was living in like Central and Camelback, like, uptown, downtown, whatever what you want to call it, Phoenix. And there happened to be an improv theater across the street from me, and I had no idea of it at the time. And I just saw a bunch of people every weekend coming out, having a great time, like laughing as they would walk out the door. And I'm like, okay, that's not a something's going on over there that I don't know about. It's not a bar or anything like that I know of. So I went and looked in the window, and it was an improv theater, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll go check out a show. Went and saw a show, waited a week, went and saw another one. Then I signed up for classes shortly after that, and just like basically have never left. Went through all the instruction you can imagine there, got put on a bunch of teams, and then have just been doing that for 10 years. And then I started teaching it. And then I started my own sketch comedy theater, which is the Buckaroo Lodge. And we have a show coming up in August at Tempe Center for the Arts. And I've been leaning into that pretty heavily for the last. So I've been doing improv for 10 years, and I've been leaning into the sketch for a little over a year. And yeah, I'm just going to start offering classes up in September there. And so, yeah, just improv, acting, and performing arts has been my life for the last decade, like ever since we pretty much last time we saw each other.
Yeah, it looks, what I see on social media looks so cool and interesting.
It really has changed my life. And I may have used the word like cliche a few times in this, but it totally was one of those things where, because I hurt my knee skateboarding, and just because of all the extracurricular stuff that was happening in that community, I was like, I got to step out, and didn't have anything else to kind of glom onto or focus on that filled that void for me until I discovered what improv was. And yeah, it really had opened me up to a whole other world of like a community of people that have become friends and family.
Yeah. I'm curious, as it relates to the grief work that I do separate from this, I've worked with some comedians before. And I've always been curious about, or let me clarify, comedians who had experienced a death, a significant death. And I've always been curious about how it's probably different for everybody, but how that grief or death can show up in the comedy and in the work that you do. So for you, does that show up?
Oh yeah, well, absolutely. Well, like specifically a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned my sisters were out here, so they came to a show because they do that whenever they come down here. But I made it, and I mean, it does naturally anyway, but specifically I went hard for it for on this one. Like I dropped a couple Easter eggs in that show that only they would get, that my
Mm.
you had to know my mom to get the joke. And they're the only person like they're the only people laughing at those ones. So definitely that time. And I used my mom's name in a scene and like her ex-husband's occupation in a thing. So yeah, I definitely got to play around with it in that one. Yeah, the comedy and grief thing, it's weird. You wouldn't expect them to kind of go so much hand in hand, but they very much do in my experience being around the theater. Anytime,
Yeah.
usually when there's, I mean, we're also such just like community family people anyway. We just like to make fun of stuff. But lots of times when people are going through some of, whether it's a death or even just any other kind of like horse shit life thrown at you, the theater is where they come to.
Hmm. Yeah. It's not strange to me. It makes sense to me that those things would go well together. Grief brings out like the most raw of like human experiences, right? And I think I'm not the expert in the comedy world, but I think that's where a lot of the material is sort of pulled from, is from these like raw, real human experiences.
Oh yeah, well, especially in the improv scene, that's where it's all coming from, is those, that real in the moment kind of reaction.
Hmm. Yeah, that's cool. Various forms people I keep picking up the message that I need to step out of my comfort zone in some ways. And one of the ideas that has come up in various ways is improv. And I'm like, hell no, I'm not doing improv. But then I keep seeing your stuff and I'm like, shit, that does look kind of fun. So
If
maybe
you, yeah,
someday.
as far as like getting out of your comfort zone, it will destroy that wall that you have, that anyone has built up to insulate themselves in with, because it's, I mean, just doing what we're doing, it heavily relies on teamwork and not being afraid to fail. I feel like I got my inherent, like my dad was very much into like comedic writing and writing screenplays and stuff. And I feel like my kind of sense of like, I wish he was around. I mean, obviously he would be old as hell right now if he was still alive, but I wish he was around, at the like 10 years ago at the beginning of this, when like this journey I started, when I first started discovering it, and just how much like it really is. It's like the most joy I've ever had, aside from like when I found skateboarding, that I've experienced. And it just feels like I'm in that lane. Like I finally found my lane or whatever, the place where I'm supposed to be. And I just wish that my mom got to experience a little bit. Like she got to come to a couple shows, even though she was old, and kind of like talking back when you're not supposed to, and those kinds of, not so much heckling, but just not knowing that she wasn't supposed to be talking. So it was kind of, adorable in a way. But I wish my dad was still around just to kind of, I don't know, bounce some kind of these ideas that I had.
Um, yeah, and see you in that arena.
Yeah. But as far as like
Mhm.
stepping out of your comfort zone, I can't recommend a more out of your comfort zone in
Or
your,
terrifying place to start.
yeah,
Maybe I'll
exactly.
show up in one of your classes someday.
Yeah, please do. Or even just come check out a show. You don't have to, we have jams every other weekend. And that's a quick way just to write your name, throw it in the bucket. You can get on stage and do like a scene with somebody for like a minute. So it's like you get a sample taste of what could possibly happen.
Oh my God, that sounds terrible. But you probably thought what I asked you to do with this podcast sounds terrible too. So
Well, like I said, my main concern was just making sure that I had enough to talk about in the conversation. I'm looking at the clock now.
yeah,
We've got over an
yeah,
hour. And
that's
I could
good.
probably even still go more. So that seems
Yeah.
to be.
No, we definitely had enough to fill the time, but we're not in a rush. So is there anything though that still feels left unsaid for you for today?
I don't think so. I'm glad I got in the trauma age thing, because that was definitely one of them that I wanted to make sure I got in there. And then I forgot about it, obviously, until like kind of the end there. But
Hmm.
that's one that has been, out of everything else that we've talked about today, because I don't know how much it relates necessarily, because it's not so much grief related, but it kind of is. But that's the one I feel the most, is that when my dad first died, I felt like a lot of like, you remember that old movie Failure to Launch?
Yeah, kind of.
He's like
Yeah.
Owen Wilson or something was
Mhm.
in it. Where he's like a dude in his 30s who never moved out of his parents' house or something like that. Like
Mhm.
I was able to move out of my parents' house and able to like do stuff on my own kind of, but I felt like I was never able to get out of this whatever mindset I was in
Mhm.
since. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously I've matured and gotten older and my thinking has too, but not in the same way.
Yeah, well, it's a real thing. And your dad died when you were 16. And if that was in any way a trauma for you, then yeah, a part of you can get stuck in that 16-year-old developmental stage. Like certain parts don't move forward in that way. So that makes sense, and that happens.
And that was
Yeah.
one like that just popped up on my radar within this past year. And I don't know. I care less now about like what other people think about me. So it's a weird thing to admit to though. So, you know, I mean, be like, oh yeah, I've been like 16 mentally this whole time, which is like not, it's, you know, it's obviously not the case, but I don't know. It's just it's a hard thing to describe to people. So
Mhm.
I don't do it very often going down that rabbit hole.
Mhm.
Something I guess you've had to have experienced and lived with.
Mhm. Yeah. You have an awareness around it too. I actually think a lot of people have experienced that in different ways, but there's not much awareness around it, maybe. So, yeah. Billy, thank you. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your willingness to talk about grief and to share your people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here with me, Laura Walton, and my incredible guest on Grief on Purpose. Your presence is a gift, and I'm so grateful you're walking this path with us. For more connection and resources, you'll find everything you need in the show description. To my guests, thank you for sharing your person with us today. It is truly an honor to know your story. I'm your host, Laura Walton. Until next time, be kind to yourself and remember you're not alone in your grief. We are here on purpose.